future. There are no people in the future. No people at all. There are no people in the future. Where did all my people go? There are no people in the future. Let me try my people call. Where are all my people? Where are all my people? I guess I'll fly away now.
Hey, everybody, welcome. It is Wednesday, July 27th, 2022. Yes, welcome to the Wednesday show with Cyril Mychalejko. It's great to have Cyril back. Cyril, of course, is the editor-in-chief at the Bucks County Beacon, and he joins me to dig into pressing issues in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, and hell, across the globe. The show is part of Raging Chicken's family of podcasts, our Monday evening interview show, and our Friday Politics Roundup, where we break down the good, the bad, and the ugly in state and national politics. You can get all our shows by subscribing to our podcast on Podbean, iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also help out the show by heading over to our YouTube channel if you're not there already. Smash that subscribe button, like the stream for this show, and hit that notification bell so you know every time that we go live. You can check out all the great work at the Bucks County Beacon at buckscountybeacon.com. That's buckscountybeacon.com. And you can sign up for Cyril's newsletter on Substack. That's cyrilmychalejko.substack.com. Links for those are in today's show notes. You can help support this show by becoming a patron for as little as $5 a month. Head on over to patreon.com/rcpress. Your support has helped make today's show possible. And you can also make sure to join our Discord server. Got info on how to do that in today's show notes. Special shout out goes to Jonathan Mann, who wrote our intro song, There Are No People in the Future. Check out all his great stuff on his YouTube page and follow him on Twitter at @SongADayMan. That's with two N's at @SongADayMan on Twitter. And yes, everybody, pets are welcome on our show. And everybody, want to remind you, do not let Paul Martino and his oligarch friends buy our schools and push extremist politics in our community. Raging Chicken has teamed up with levelfield.net. That's levelfield.net to launch a truly community-rooted pack to invest in organizing, support local and statewide progressive candidates, and unmask the toxic organizations injecting our communities with right-wing extremism. We're putting small dollar donations to work to beat back the power of big money. You can get more information and drop your donation at ragingchicken.levelfield.net. Well, on today's show, I wish we weren't getting to this point, but on today's show, Cyril and I will be digging into the ongoing school board saga at Central Bucks School District, in particular, the school board's new book banning policy. Yes, the school board met again last night and passed the controversial policy by a 6-3 vote. Parents, students, and community members rallied outside the meeting and expressed their opposition to the policy in the meeting. And once again, Central Bucks is putting itself in the national spotlight for what happens when extremists take over. Well, that doesn't seem like a good welcoming, but good morning, Cyril. How you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing all right, Kevin. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, well, you got it. Can't say that it is great news day in the wake of last night's school board meeting around this book banning policy.
No, it's not. I think a lot of people kind of were really hit hard by this. It's just like you knew this, you were expecting this to happen, but, until it actually does, you don't feel the kind of ramifications, especially after a lot of the, physical, intellectual, and emotional labor, people have been putting into, organizing resistance to this, censorship and book banning policy that the right-wing school board kind of pushed down the throats of the majority of parents, students, teachers, and librarians.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Well, I want to get into what some of the implications are going to be, talk a little bit about the school board meeting that happened last night and how this ended up going down. But before we get there, especially for folks who, again, are necessarily not well versed in what's been happening here in Central Bucks, people are coming from our broader listener community, can you talk us through a little bit about how we got here? Right? When did this show up? And why are we even considering this? And what is this book banning policy all about?
Sure. I mean, if you look at it from like a macro level, like this is part of like a national campaign, right?
Right.
And this was something that was really spearheaded by like Christopher Rufo, and it really like started to rear its head, with this whole anti-critical race theory hysteria, right? And then like once they set the table for that, they focused in on library books and libraries. So now locally, I would put a lot of the responsibility on this, with like local, right-wing actors in the community. One in particular, I would say, would be like TJ Kosin. And so he's a Central Bucks parent. Also, is or supposedly was now the head of the Proud American Patriots Network. And so what this group is it's a 3% militia group. Now that's not my opinion.
Right.
Like these are their documents that before they scrubbed from the internet after they were exposed when they had planned to join a reopened Bucks picnic and stake out an August school board meeting starting at noon until it started before it was canceled. They had documents online that said, and I'm quoting, "The 3% movement is not just you and me. There are sheriffs, police officers, firefighters, medics, nurses, teachers, doctors, etc." Right? And so this group, then we later find out from the investigative reporting of PA Spotlight, was directly involved with creating a website called Woke PA.
Right.
And what Woke PA is just kind of like a one-stop shop for various school boards across Bucks County and across Pennsylvania to cherry pick materials from certain literature. A lot of it is, LGBTQ literature, and kind of like use that as a clarion call, for their other like far right instigators in their various communities, respective communities, in order to kind of like inundate school board meetings with like this ridiculous, with these ridiculous accusations that librarians and teachers are quote unquote grooming students because there's certain books that have, that might have like a sexual passage included in it.
Right.
And so this, they are like one of the main actors here. And then what we know from them and from the parents that were kind of like citing their website at the local school board meetings, like the Proud American Patriot Network, they endorsed 3 of the sitting school board candidates when they were running, right? They gave them their endorsement. It was Jim Pepper, Deborah Cannon, and Lisa Sissio. They were all endorsed by this same group that's pushing this book banning kind of hysteria. And they all subsequently voted for this policy, which essentially gave, granted, this far right group and their, followers and fellow travelers wishes.
I think it was good to see Chris Ullery basically published a piece this past week in the Courier Times, basically about kind of woke PA, which again, I mean, better now than never. But I mean, I give full credit to what you've been doing at the Bucks County Beacon and, like you said, PA Spotlight, for basically tracking this stuff early and often, right? Because without the spade work that you've all been doing, and let's say a lot of activists in the community who've been trying to uncover what the money is behind these organizations and these campaigns, without that work, this would have just people would just be thinking like, oh, they're trying to protect our kids, would not understand what the agenda is that's behind it. And to see that we're getting to this point where it's not just the extremists shouting, horrific things at school board meetings or making all sorts of kind of anti-LGBTQ claims at school board meetings, like a bunch of, kind of crazies or people on the margins of societies. We're seeing this now in the policies in the school being able to pass by 6-3. Despite kind of opposition for the community. So, I mean, we're at that point now where this stuff is cemented in, and like literal militia organizations, right, have been able to influence and push policies that are basically going to impact the kids in our schools now.
Yeah, them, and then like supplemented by like, well-funded astroturf groups like Moms for Liberty. Speaking of one of the activists and writers that write for the Beacon and had been doing quite a bit of work even before that is Diana Legerman, who just published an article, Astroturfing in Central Bucks School District, Moms for Liberty and book bans. And so like two of these endorsed candidates, these candidates endorsed by the 3% militia cell in Bucks County, were also Moms for Liberty. And if you follow the news even the slightest bit, you know that Moms for Liberty is like the main actor in this whole nationwide like book banning campaign that we're seeing in various school boards across the country.
100%. So we get this policy. We got outside organizations. You got militia organizations, well organized and in many cases well-funded extremist right-wing organizations basically pushing these kind of policies. Members of the community taking it out, endorsed candidates on the school board supporting these kinds of policies, and in cases writing these policies or pushing the policies. And this was originally put back, if I remember, back in May, where the initial kind of book banning policy was being offered. They had some revisions that were meant to it, and it was up for a final vote last night at the Central Bucks School Board meeting. So can you take us into that meeting and kind of what happened at that meeting and where we are now?
Sure. I mean, first, like, before the meeting, the community turned out. They stepped up and they spoke out. Central Bucks School District Community Against Book Bans organized an amazing press conference with about 200 people right before the school board meeting, where you had different community members, students, recent graduates, parents, the ACLU of PA, PFLAG, all showing up to speak out, to just reiterate what everyone, who's been following the story knows, and that's that this library policy is an express to censorship and book banning. So it was really inspiring, kind of like seeing that organized so successfully. Because we're going to need to see more of that moving forward, because, it doesn't, they're not done with this. This is, just part of like phase one of their plans to kind of gut and, completely transform public education. In the meeting, what you saw is probably, I would say, like 90% of the speakers, again, speaking out against this policy, pleading with the school board, not to mention Superintendent Lukabaugh, right, to please at least press pause on this. This doesn't have to be passed right now during the summer, right? You can wait on this because obviously there's some issues, right? There's confusion. They were even confused about, their own policy. But, unfortunately, and not surprisingly, it fell on deaf ears.
Right.
And then, when it got to after public comment, and then when it got to, a conversation among, the school board members, like a simple question was asked. Who wrote the policy?
Yeah, there you go.
The right-wing school board members would not answer it. They refused to answer. They refused to take responsibility, for who was responsible for putting this book banning policy together. I mean, that, this is supposed to be like a small d democratic body, right? Accountable to the voters and to taxpayers of the school district. At the very least, there should be transparency about how policies are made and passed. So we couldn't even figure out who wrote this policy, and who is responsible for, plagiarizing 50% of it from the Texas Education Agency, like we pointed out after we ran it through a plagiarism checker. Right. So whoever is responsible gets an F from me, an automatic F for plagiarism. But, I think that spoke volumes. I think the fact that Superintendent Lukabaugh had nothing to say about that speaks volumes about the content of his character, right? And his role in all of this. And then as a couple of the dissenting school board members, Tabitha DeAngelo and Karen Smith, we're trying to kind of like start a conversation, right, about what the concerns are so that the far right, school board members could kind of, at least attempt to address them. Either they were kind of talked over, or at one point, school board president Dana Hunter, she said she literally said that, I don't know that I wish to engage in a discussion, right? Like they're passing this policy that's going to have these like broad implications for, educators, teachers, librarians, students, parents, and they don't even want to talk about it.
It's incredible.
Any illusion. Yeah. I mean, any illusions that people have like that, that this right-wing school board is, going to pay any mind or even give any effort into consensus building, let alone listening. You should just smash that illusion now and just like recognize, like this school board has power. They seized power thanks in part to like aspiring oligarch Paul Martino and his Martino money. 100%. And now they're going to use and exercise that power to push as many of their far right, policy wish list as possible. And this is what you have to deal with, right? And so like this is what people have to reconcile with now moving forward, because like this, this was a defeat for the community. And it was a win, unfortunately they see it as a win for the far right. I mean, right. Even, far right, radio host Dom Giordano, like put down his dog whistle for a second to tweet out that this was a great win, right, on his Twitter account. So that's what they see that. And then, and that's a signal to other school boards, across Bucks County and across the state, if not the country, that they can kind of like do the same thing, that they can, push through a policy that, their own librarians and teachers say amounts to censorship and book banning, that the ACLU of Pennsylvania, the American Library Association Office of Intellectual Freedom, the Education Law Center of PA, experts in, First Amendment and education law say is censorship and amounts to book banning. And just say, you know what, we don't care. We're going to do it anyway, and you're just going to have to deal with it.
Well, and it's even more than just, okay, we're just going to put it out there, we're going to be done with it. You also had a piece that you published in the Beacon that basically said, oh yeah, and they're prepared to spend up to $15,000 a month, right, to a PR firm, right, to go out and spin these policies, right, so that they get the protection from it. So they're willing to kind of dig into the coffers of the district, right, to basically spin their policies too as well.
Yeah, I mean, they're not even, it's not that they're prepared to do it, like they did it. They voted on that last night. And so that was like, after they passed this policy, they voted to approve $15,000 a month contract with this PR firm to spin their divisive policies like this book banning, like the tearing down of LGBTQ flags from classrooms. And what they get with this is a crisis communications team that's available to them 24/7. So, they probably kind of were able to hit the ground running last night as soon as this meeting was over, because there's a crisis in Central Bucks, a crisis of confidence that this school board, the majority members of the school board and this, their co-conspirator in this, which is Dr. Abe Lukabaugh, because that's what he is. Like, that's not, hyperbole. He is working with them hand in glove to push this agenda.
Right.
He published an op-ed that was completely dishonest with school board president Dana Hunter in the Bucks County Courier-Times, saying that this doesn't amount to censorship, this doesn't amount to book banning. They sent that out onto the district email list. They didn't bother to tell anyone else in the school board, right? And he's dismissive of the criticisms of the community, of his own teachers, he's supposed to represent his teachers and librarians. He doesn't have their back. He doesn't have their back at all, and they know that. And like, you know, I've talked to a staffer at the district, and the staffer told me that morale is really low and it's just going to plummet. So he's willing to lie and say this doesn't amount to book banning, even though if you look at the policy, it does. Like, so let's look at the policy just real quick, a few quick points. One is that it's very vague, right? And, you know, as the ACLU put it, it's probably vague by design. So like some of the language that they use is like implied nudity. Like, what is that? Can you define that? What is implied nudity in a book?
Cyril, that means when somebody goes to take a shower. Someone goes to take a shower, that is potential up for, you know, I mean, seriously.
Exactly. And so here, they're flagging books with quote unquote implied nudity because of their like puritanical vision of what a school library should look like, right? So, you know, I'm going to go ahead and blow the whistle on a book that has actual nudity. All right. I'm sorry if I, you know, offend anyone, but in the Pulitzer Prize winning graphic novel Mouse, there is a naked mouse, you know, in that book. And to suggest that that might be pulled because of this, you know, isn't me making something up. It's been pulled because of that in a district in Tennessee by school board members that share similar politics than the school board members that we have here. You know, the school and the policy also talks about appropriateness, very vague, subjective. They don't even have a process laid out about how for the parents, and it's not just parents too, like anyone in the district can challenge a book, right? Anyone. So if like, I don't know if you remember, like back in November, there was that school board meeting where, you know, two individuals, Art Lawson and Ed Mackhouse, were like vomiting anti-Semitic conspiracies and transphobic lies. Like if they live in the district, they in theory could challenge books, right? And just an interesting side note, you know, I love how President Dana Hunter was so quick to protect their free speech, right? When they were vomiting this bile and hate and it was upsetting people, yet when their fellow school board members just want to have a conversation about, you know, this policy, they shut it down.
Right.
They just shut it down completely and moved directly to a vote. You know, and then they're talking, you know, in the policy, it talks about nonfiction resources, like to incorporate accurate and authentic factual content. Well, that's what nonfiction is, right, to begin with. So like what that's signaling is that they want to decide what is accurate and like what is authentic factual content. And so we know by like the politics of, you know, the Proud American Patriot Network, the Moms for Liberty, you know, and their marionettes in the school board, you know, they have like a very kind of like jingoistic, you know, version and vision of what America is. So, you know, them and their parents, right, you know, and their proxies, you know, in the audience that they place in these school board meetings, you know, they in theory, they could challenge, you know, in Council Rock South, you know, they have a book called, I highly recommend it, a great book, Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee.
Yes, wonderful.
Right? Which is a history of the American West, like told through the Native American experience, right? So this isn't very flattering to, you know, the white settler colonialists or the US government, because the history of the American West as experienced by Native Americans is one of rape, pillage, and genocide, you know, by the ruling whites in the country. And so in theory, that could be, you know, challenged and removed, you know, and then never mind, again, going back to, you know, who are the designees that Dr. Lucabaugh is going to kind of like put on this committee to decide this. Like, you know, the school board is going to kind of like stack this with their people, right?
Right.
You know that he, at best, is spineless, but probably more factually is kind of complicit like this. Like, we can't trust him to like stand up, for books like this. And then in the policy itself, it states like any materials removed pursuant to the challenge process will not be returned to the library without meeting the criteria for selection as outlined in this policy. So what that means is, essentially, unless these books are rewritten, right, and certain parts are edited out, they're not coming back. Yet,
exactly.
Dr. Lucabaugh, Dana Hunter, Glassbaum, oh, this isn't book banning. This isn't about removing books. Well, what is it? We're just disappearing them permanently?
Right.
Because that's what it is.
Exactly. 100%. And like, look, this is where, to go back where we started in some ways, this is where this is kind of like national in scope. So there's two things that we've tried both on this show with Cyril, on my shows, kind of on a regular basis, try to always point out what is happening at these school board levels, right, are the trial runs, right, for bigger movements, right? They are the grassroots mobilization, the kind of materialization of a kind of a broader kind of right-wing agenda. And because these are connected to well-funded groups, these is part of a national thing. So we can also turn to what's happening nationally to also see what's coming down the pike. So I hope to have a guest on the upcoming, in the next couple of weeks, is going to nail down some of this stuff, who's actually talking about this stuff. Luisa Marcela Osa, I'm sorry. So for example, she was pointing out, she's writing about this and talking about, look what's happening in Ohio. They're just posting out a both sides bill. That means that everyone at both sides had to be represented. So on one side, it says slavery is bad, while both sides mean you have to have slavery is good, right? I mean, what the hell is this? And some of the hearings have been on the verge of comical if they weren't so serious, right? I mean, how are you going to defend you want to be against racism, and then you have to show what? The other side? Pro-racism? I mean, how does this work? This is what the right wing has kind of geared itself up to do. So we're going to see that stuff happening at the state level too as well, which is why these midterm elections are so important. But right now, it seems like we've got to start digging in for the kind of next round of school board elections and continue the mobilization and organization that's on the ground. So, I mean, Cyril, given this stuff, I mean, this is serious stuff. I mean, it's not like we can wish this away, right, at this point. I know the ACLU is talking about court challenges and so on. But what do you foresee happening in the kind of the near future? And what do you think this means going forward?
Sure. First, again, I just want to reiterate, like, just the amazing job that a lot of members of the community did, kind of like organizing against this, talking to their neighbors, getting them to turn out, writing letters and op-eds in the newspaper, whether it's Kate Nazemi or Kelly DeJong or Marlene. While we're dealing with this kind of like, far right threat that actually has power, like there is, a kind of robust resistance, right, that's growing. And so, I would just say that, don't fall into despair because this is, and then just recognize like this isn't going to be the last time we're disappointed in the coming months.
For sure.
Because they're going to go after curriculum next, and I'm hearing that social studies curriculum is on the chopping block. So we have to, I think, just like short term is just like keep doing things like the press conference, just getting the message out to this community, because like I'd like to think that this isn't like, some like, progressive versus like, far right, battle here. Like, I would like to think that like a majority of the community is actually against this, right? And that you just, unfortunately, we found ourselves in a position where we have a school board that is just going to kind of like prioritize the whims and wants of a loud, vocal, and toxic minority. More longer term is that, while you're building like kind of like grassroots power and organization, that has to be channeled into elections, right? And like you said, on multiple levels. We need a congressperson that's going to kind of like speak out and stand up to this, like Ashley E has. We obviously need new school board members, right, to replace these. If Doug Mastriano wins the governorship, what I just said might be a moot point.
Well, it will set things back an additional decade.
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, there's that quote, like, the arc of justice, like, or the arc of history, like, bends towards justice. Like, right now, it feels like, the arc of history is just like Sisyphus, just like moving that rock up to the top of the hill and then just falling back down and starting all over again. Like, given like all these like rollbacks that we're seeing with our rights, not just in our school board, but like across the country, with women's, bodily autonomy,
right,
etc.
100%.
But maybe that's what the struggle is, right? Like,
right.
That's what that's how we have to kind of like just like reconcile with that moving forward. But you have to just kind of keep struggling.
Well, and that
rock up.
Absolutely, and that quote, right? I think, like, on the one hand, even like Dr. Martin Luther King himself was actually saying, it's like, okay, yes, the arc of history is long, but it bends toward justice, but that kind of slowly got removed from kind of like material organizing at some point, right? Where people thought that that history happens by itself, right? But as I said in the show multiple times, yes, it bends towards justice, but it doesn't do it on its own. It does through people's actions and organizing and mobilization. That is the only thing that has righted the ship. And what we're seeing is essentially a return to the Lochner era when it comes to the Supreme Court. We're seeing kind of rollbacks to kind of like like neo Jim Crow levels, right, in school boards and schools across the country. And we're playing catch up, and I think it's just a fact that we've got to understand.
Yeah, and just one other point I want to make. Like, I had a conversation with one of the recent CB East alums who spoke last night, Sarah Zhang, and she's writing a piece for us that I'm hoping to get up today. When we talked, what she said is that she believes that like students need to kind of like step up more, right? And students need to be at the forefront, especially with these actions that are impacting their own education. Like, they need to be like organizing and mobilizing and speaking out and demanding a seat at the table, because they're the ones that are ultimately affected by these policies. And what we've seen is that students can make a difference, like in Central York, where a very organized, diverse, age diverse, racially diverse, sexual identity diverse coalition of students organized sustained protests, were able to demand that their voices were heard. Their message was spread not only across their district, but across the country and the world, actually. And they were able to roll back a racist book ban and material ban that their right-wing dominant school board had put into place, which was like banning books, such subversive books as the children's book I Am Rosa Parks, right? That's this is like what we're dealing with now. So yeah, and that's and there are like some like amazing students that are organizing in Bucks County. Like Alexandra Coffey, who spoke as well last night, and Annika. But obviously there needs to be more, right? And I think like part of like the strategy of this school board about doing this in the summer was kind of like catching that break, when like, not only parents are kind of like out, and doing vacation and trying to kind of like enjoy their lives, but students are kind of checked out too, and I would be too, like after a long school year. So yeah, hopefully, and I think we will see this, like between like the school boards and just like with abortion rights on that have been kind of rolled back 50 years, and with the with the threat of outright bans, I think students, they're mobilizing, and let's just hope that continues to grow, and that they're, maybe, beyond Bucks County, there begins a student movement across the state, like, begins to coordinate as well.
100%. Well, look, this is an open invite to any kind of student organizers, community organizations out there that are looking for every venue as possible to kind of amplify the messages and the work that's going on down. You have an open invite here at Altitude Podcast. This is you just shoot me an email at ragingchicken@gmail.com. You could DM me on Twitter at RCPress. And we will do our part to try to amplify the message of the work that you're doing here. And Cyril, I got to say, look, the Bucks County Beacon has become an indispensable part of this movement by being a venue where, one, just these issues are being covered, right? And again, you've been tuned into these dynamics that we're seeing played out for months, right? I mean, if not like since you first took helm of the Beacon, right? Has been a square focus on this stuff. So I also encourage anybody who can, obviously, get over and kind of read the Beacon, but also help support the Beacon if you can. They have ways of kind of that you can join in. You can help support it financially. You can share it around, making sure people are getting their eyes on this stuff and sharing it with their friends. So I want to thank you and everyone at the Beacon for the amazing work that you're doing, Cyril. It's really, it's been, like I say, the Beacon has become an indispensable tool as part of the movement.
No, I appreciate that. And, and I just appreciate how the community has embraced it. Not just as a resource, but as something to participate in, because we have just an amazing community of writers. Barbara Simmons, Anusha, Diana, Kirsten, Kelly. We have student writers like Sarah and Alexandra. So I'm leaving out people. I apologize. Jenny Stevens.
It's like the Gilligan's Island thing, and the rest.
So and that's just been like really part of the exciting part of this project is just kind of like seeing it grow, and then just seeing it truly become a grassroots participatory media outlet.
100%. Well, Cyril, I really appreciate you taking the time out today, especially in the wake of the school board meeting here. Hope that we can get together a little bit more quickly next time. I know our schedules have been absolutely insane. Mine have been away, coming back, and all sorts of craziness happening here, as yours as well. But thanks for taking time today, and I look forward to talking to you again, man.
Thanks, Kevin. I'll talk to you soon.
All right, you got it. All right, this is Kevin Mahoney, editor and founder of Raging Chicken. I want to remind you can help support this show by heading on to patreon.com/rcpress, where you can become a patron for as little as $5 a month. Remember, Friday, we'll be here with Amy Connect once again. We'll be giving our Friday Politics Roundup on the good, the bad, and the ugly in state and national politics. We're off next week, but then we return the following week. We're going to raise some hell. See ya!
I'll fly away.